Okay, we just might take another minute or two to make sure that we've got everyone in the room before we start. Just to let you know, you're here for the Winter Comfort at Home webinar, which is being jointly presented by Ku-ring-gai Council and the City of Ryde and presented by Renew. Looks like everyone's in, so we might just start off. So my name's Jenny Kent. I'm a Sustainability Engagement Officer at Ku-ring-gai Council. And Liz, do you just want to quickly introduce yourself as well?
Absolutely. Hi, thanks, Jenny. Yes, my name's Liz Pearce. I work for City of Ryde. I'm the Home Waste and Sustainability Advisory Service at City of Ryde. Great to have you here tonight.
Yep, so welcome everyone. We're really looking forward to this presentation tonight. So Helen Oakey from Renew is with us. She's actually the Chief Executive Officer of Renew, so we're very privileged to have her here tonight with a lot of expertise and a great background on energy efficiency and ways to make your home more comfortable in winter. So just a few housekeeping items before Helen kicks off, or actually we've just got a few things to do before Helen kicks off. Firstly, when you come in, we've muted you and we'll ask if your cameras can be on, but the meeting is being recorded. This webinar is being recorded. If you don't wish your face to be on a recording, please then turn off your cameras. That's fine. We'll be taking questions through the chat function. So at the bottom of your screen, most people should be familiar with that. There's the chat, you just click on that and then you post your message in there. Liz and I will be looking at the messages throughout, and at certain points Helen will stop and if there's questions that have come in, we'll get Helen to respond to those. I think that was it in terms of the housekeeping. We might just move on. Caitlin. So Caitlin is our support person for tonight. Thank you very much. So first of all, I'd just like to acknowledge on behalf of Ku-ring-gai Council that we recognise the traditional custodians of the land and pay respect to elders past, present and emerging. And then we can move on, Caitlin, to the next one.
Yep, thanks, Jenny. And just on behalf of City of Ryde, we would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land from which we join you, the Wadawurrung clan of the Darug Nation, and would also like to pay respect to the elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Liz. Okay, so we're just going to stop sharing that presentation now and Helen's going to share hers. So it's over to you, Helen.
Great, thanks Jenny. Thanks Liz. I'm just going to do some Zoom acrobatics, so just bear with me for a second. There we go. Okay, I think we're all good to go. Great, so tonight we're going to be talking about winter comfort at home. I am coming to you this evening from Wurundjeri country in Melbourne. I live on the outskirts of Melbourne now, but I just noted that I do have actually quite a special connection with Ku-ring-gai because I was actually born in the Ku-ring-gai Council Shire. So there's a little bit of synchronicity there. Haven't lived in Sydney for very long, but the climates in Melbourne and Sydney are quite different, as you're probably aware. And so, of course, we're going to be thinking about that as we go through tonight's presentation. So now I'm just going to see if this is all working nicely. Sorry, there we go. Oh, it is great. Okay. So what we're going to cover tonight is thinking about energy usage in the home and what builds in energy usage, what we're considering. We're going to talk about thermal performance of the houses that we live in. And by thermal performance, what we mean is how does the outside of the home operate? How does the building shell operate in terms of keeping warm air inside, cold air outside, or vice versa in other seasons? We're going to have a conversation about heating, and we'll talk about hot water, and we're going to talk about some other stuff, for aptly labeled other stuff, a very technical term. I'm going to try to keep it not technical tonight, because one of the concerns around talking about energy and energy at home is it gets really technical really quickly. And what happens is that we start thinking that we can't ask a question or put something out there because it's actually just really complicated. And, people are using language like kilowatt hours and things like that, that actually we start to glaze over a little bit and think about, think about other things. So let's try and keep it really grounded tonight so that it all makes good sense. So energy usage in the home. So basically, this is a graph or an image that shows a breakdown of where most of the energy that we're using in our home goes towards. And it can vary quite a lot depending on each person's house. So it would depend on the house you live in, the appliances that you're using, the climate that you live in, and obviously how much you use your appliances, so what your lifestyle is. And you can see that the biggest consumer of energy in most homes is heating and cooling. Now, that percentage might be a tiny bit lower in Sydney for heating and cooling as compared to, say, Canberra, where it's really cold. But in the main, heating and cooling is where the energy consumption really kicks in. Water heating takes up 23% of our energy on average in most homes. Other appliances, 14%. And fridges and freezers are the other big one as well. Just in most people, obviously, are running a fridge and a freezer. Depending on the age of the appliance, that can be a bit of a guzzler. And then we've got some smaller energy components as well. So standby power, cooking, and lighting. For those of you that might have a pool in your backyard, unless you're actually running your pool heating and cooling on solar, sorry, not cooling, but your pool heating on solar, then the pools can also add quite a lot to that energy consumption. All right, there we go. All right. So I'm not going to spend too long on this, but one of the things around energy is just being a little bit aware of what you're using and what your consumption looks like over the year. And we all get sent an energy bill. There's a sort of fairly standard formula for how an energy bill looks these days. And this will show you the basic sort of, things that you need to be looking for. I find that, obviously you're looking at the total amount due when you have to pay your bill by. But one of the most interesting parts of your energy bill, the one that I always open up and check the first time, is the thing around consumption. So what's your average cost per day and what's your average usage? And what does it look like over the year? So if you look at this little graph down at 6, you can see that consumption curve and how it changes across different months in the year, depending on whether it's hot or cold outside. For me, that's the most interesting. And then, of course, the other one that's the most interesting for me is it going up since last year or has it gone down? So am I getting more efficient or am I getting less efficient? Things like I do this on my water bill as well. Am I using more water or are we using less water? And it just gives you a bit of a clue as to looking out for potentially if there's any problems. If your energy consumption's gone up radically, you need to keep an eye on that. And also, if you've got a really big leak or you've got something that's not operating efficiently, then sometimes you can get spikes in consumption. And looking at your bill and looking at the comparisons give you an idea about whether things are just sort of tracking steadily or whether there's actually a problem that you need to check out. There's a few other things in there, and the other things to think about in terms of tariffs and charges. And every energy company will offer different variations on the tariffs that you pay. So some people pay what's called a flat tariff, where you pay the same amount per unit of energy across the day. And a lot of people are paying off-peak and peak rates when they pay a tariff. So you pay a lower amount during the day and you pay a higher amount, you pay a higher amount at the end of the day. So being aware of your tariff and shopping around. My key message for energy bills is do shop around if you have time. If your energy bill is concerning you, it's good to shop around and talk to other suppliers and see if there's another energy plan that might suit you, or even talking to your own energy retailer and seeing if there's another energy plan that might suit. Okay, so Sorry, I'm just ducking back into a different screen for me. Right, there we go. There's also a really good federal government website that you can go to that just gives you a bit of a guide about understanding and comparing your bills. So that website's actually on the screen at the moment. So when you go back and look at the presentation, you can grab that up. All right, so thermal performance. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was heat loss in winter. When we think about what we're going to do in our homes to save energy and look at our appliances and then potentially think about how to reduce our consumption, I always think about it in sort of a three-step process. The first thing is thinking about the thermal performance of your house and about how you can wrap your house up, for want of a better description, to keep the hot air inside, the cold air outside in winter. The second thing is thinking about sealing up the gaps in your house so that you make your house airtight. And then the third thing is coming back and looking at how your appliances are operating and how you're using your appliances. So throughout the presentation, if you keep that frame in your head, I call it wrap it, seal it, and then check your power. That sort of three-part process. And this is really the first part of that process. So when we look at a home in winter, you can see that you can lose a lot of heat through the roof of a house just by not having it properly insulated. Most modern homes in Australia have got really good ceiling insulation, but a lot of our Australian homes that were built before 2004 have actually got really poor ceiling insulation or it's kind of gotten worse over time. We lose about 15 to 25% through the walls and 10 to 20% through the windows and a good sort of 15% through the floor as well. You do get solar gain through north windows in winter, which is great. So that's a great way of getting heat back into the house. But at night time, when the sun's going down, your house can be losing heat through all of these places if you don't have your house properly wrapped up. So one of the really good things to do is to get a home energy assessment. And a home energy assessment will examine how your house is performing, basically, and do an assessment of what's working, what's not working, and looking at your insulation. Somebody will go up into the ceiling, check that it's the right level. They'll look at your appliances, find out if your appliances are running efficiently, talk to you about how you might be able to change the things that you're doing at home to save energy, and just generally giving you good advice about how to use energy efficiently. So what's happening in Australia at the moment is that we're about to have a new national system of doing energy assessments for people's homes. It's called the NatHERS system, which is a great acronym that most people aren't really going to understand, but it stands for the Nationwide Home Energy Rating System. Up until recently, a lot of the states and territories have had different systems. So in Victoria, they have the scorecard. In New South Wales, they have a different version of a scorecard. And so what the governments are trying to do is just get consistency across the states. This system is actually currently being trialled in New South Wales at the moment. And I'll leave it for you to go back when you get the recording. And if Liz and Jenny can put this link perhaps into a follow-up email, then you can go back and watch this video that's available that explains how NatHERS works. I've just been locked out of my computer. Hang on a second. Oh, goodness me. Okay, back. Great. All right. So as I said, NatHERS provides consistent assessment across the country, gives you really immediate feedback, and it helps you identify places where you can make changes. It does cost between about $600 to $800, but if you think about what you might be able to save on your energy bill by getting an assessment done, then that might be a really, really good investment. And also keep your eyes open. Sometimes governments do offer incentives to get energy assessments done, or they offer rebates or loans to help. And we'll talk about that a little bit later as well. So in your ceiling, you really need to be looking at R5 insulation, even in Sydney, particularly in summer. What serves you well in winter to keep heat in will also serve you very well in summer to keep the cool air inside. And in Sydney, it can get quite hot in summer. And some parts of New South Wales can actually get quite cold as well in winter. So R5 is considered to be pretty much the right benchmark. You can get R6 ceiling insulation, but the benefits of that compared to the cost can be quite marginal. There's a question in the chat about how you get an energy assessment. I would expect that there'd be some information that can be shared with you from the council about how to do that. But basically, there are energy assessors that work right across the country. So if you sort of Google, energy assessments get NatHERS rating, then those people would come up. It's a really interesting question because it's going to be a very expanding sector, because as we go forward, what governments want to do is they want homes to have energy assessments at some point when they're sold or they're rented. And so what we're actually going to need is we're going to need a lot more energy assessors in Australia. And also because we've got the new NatHERS rating scheme, then they're all going to need to be trained up in how to do that. But you will find them, if you Google, you will find people who can do that for you. So wall insulation is the next thing. And in the walls, we want to be aiming for 2.5 rating in the walls. That's a good amount of, sorry, okay. I've gone onto the floor there by mistake. That's a good amount of, sorry, let's go the other way. Boom, boom, there we go. That's a good amount for the walls. It's not as high as the ceiling. You can obviously get a lot more insulation in your ceiling than you can in the walls. But the walls makes a very significant difference to how a house feels in winter. And in fact, as somebody who put wall insulation in a home that I lived in Canberra a few years ago, I would say that actually putting wall insulation was the single most powerful thing that I did in terms of how the home felt and how comfortable it was. But a lot of old homes that were built pre-2004, even a bit later, even if it's a house that's built pre-2010, may not have really good wall insulation in them. If you've had your home renovated and they've taken a wall out, then what you'll see is the builders will put the wall insulation back in as they do the renovation. And then the last piece of area to insulate is under the floor. This is one form of underfloor insulation, which is like the bats, but you can also do underfloor insulation with the spray foam under the floor. And the underfloor insulation serves two purposes. One is to, sort of wrap the home again and give that insulation effect that we get in the other parts of the home. But the other purpose is to stop the drafts coming in. So if you've got homes that have got floorboards and the cold air is coming up between the floorboards from underneath the house, then putting insulation or sealing the floorboards from underneath can be a really good thing to do. So one of the really good tricks when you get a home energy assessment done is to invite somebody over who's got a thermal camera. And what you can see in this picture is all of the areas of the house where the heat leaks from the house, or where the heat's coming in. So it depends how you're doing it. But you can see here that yellow area is a much hotter area than the purple area. And so potentially this might be a picture of using a thermal camera on a hot day with the heat's coming in, but you can do it both ways. So that's just a really good trick that the energy assessors use. It is legal in Australia to put ceiling insulation in by yourself at home. I vividly remember my dad going up into the roof and putting ceiling insulation in, but it's really not recommended that you do it yourself. It can be a really difficult space to work in. It's quite claustrophobic. People get dehydrated in their ceilings because they can be quite hot. There's obviously a lot of wiring up in the ceiling, so you need to be really careful about not tripping over the wiring or causing problems. And of course, you need to be careful to put the insulation in the right places and identify places in the ceiling where you might not want to insulate without checking the lighting, for example. So people who have halogen globes in their homes that get really hot, you need to be really careful how you put ceiling insulation in over the top of those. So I'd highly recommend that you do get a professional in to do ceiling insulation. Some of the other insulation, like under the floors, can be a little bit easier, but a lot of people don't like going under the floor because that involves getting down in the dirt and lying on their back for hours. So again, if you can get a tradesman to help you with that, then that can be the best option. So I'm just trying to get this to move again. There we go. A question about putting insulation in rental homes. Just be aware that tenants can request insulation for it to be installed or topped up, but at their own expense. But this is an issue that's a really live issue at the moment. The New South Wales government is currently looking at whether or not they might set standards for rental homes before they can be leased. And it's very likely that if they do, that ceiling insulation would be the first thing that they would set as a standard for rental providers to make sure that is part of the home that is being rented. So that's really much a very sort of watch this space kind of place at the moment. Okay. Renters can do some things. I might just check actually if anyone wants to put in the chat if you're either a renter or you're a landlord. It'd be really great to see if we've got any renters in the room or any landlords in the room. But this slide just runs through a little bit about the things that you can and can't do with and without permission. This might be a little bit different in New South Wales, but there are standards that are set in the New South Wales Tenancy Act that that require livability to be part of what's included. But there really isn't a lot that a tenant can do to change what we call the thermal envelope of the house because they don't have control over that part of the house. Yeah, Louise, it is legal, but again, it can be a bit of a tricky job to do the underfloor yourself. Yeah, just looking at the questions as well as they're going past. Okay, so windows. Windows love heat and lots of heat and cold comes in and out through windows. In Australia, we've got a really bad track record of putting in double glazing in homes that we built in times gone by. And actually, if your home is really old, so if it's sort of say 1980, you might even find that your window glass is very, very thin. I remember one day tapping some window glass in an old house and it was so thin. I think it was only felt like a couple of millimeters thick, and I tapped it very lightly and it just cracked. And that's what happens in very old homes. The window glass has gotten more solid, but the best solution for window glass obviously is to double glaze. That can be expensive. So we've got some other ideas about how you can manage that. And there's lots of different ways you can do double glazing, right through from sort of custom built window installs, right through to sort of, sticking plastic bubble wrap on windows if you can't afford to do anything else. But window coverings and shading really help prevent heat loss and heat gain from a house. In winter, you want to stop the hot air from going out. So what you need to be able to do is to put heavy windows up. Just bear with me for a second. Oh, that's all good. One of the perils of working from home is the dog gets triggered by various things. So in winter, it's a good idea to make sure that you've got either heavy curtains that are covering your windows or potentially things like honeycomb blinds. You can see there from that thermal imaging the effect that windows have on heat transfer in a house. So thick curtains are great, and putting a pelmet over the top of the curtains is also really powerful because when you put the pelmet over, you stop hot air from coming out of the top of the curtains and you stop cold air from coming out of the top in winter. So that really improves performance. Pelmets aren't considered to be that sexy these days in terms of, fashion, but they're a really powerful tool in terms of keeping your home more energy efficient. And then the other option is to use honeycomb, what we call honeycomb or cellular blinds. These are available at most of the blind companies these days. And this is a really great option. If you're looking for that sort of more streamlined look in your home, then, they can be made to fit the window cavity. They fit really nicely inside the frame. And also they provide insulation because they've got that air layer between the window side and the room side. So they can be incredibly effective. Double glazing is a great option, but heavy drapes can be almost as good at double glazing as keeping the heat in. You can use Perspex or stretched plastic film, and you can use adhesive film. And if you get onto the internet, there's some really great tricks that you can do with double glazing, where you can just buy the plastic and you can heat seal it around the edges of the frame, and it can stay on, say, for the winter or the summer season that you're trying to protect your room against. You can do it room by room, window by window. And so also with renters, as I said earlier, you can actually just put bubble wrap on your window. Now, a lot of people don't want to do that because it affects the view. If you're a renter, or if you're only there for a short period, or if you're really struggling in a particular room, it can be a great option. But there's also options that sit in the middle, between the high-end double glazing and the bubble wrap. There's other options like that are about retrofitting double glazing to windows. So, for example, a product like Magnetite, where basically you use a magnet around and they create a Perspex frame that you can stick over a window with a magnet, and it seals up an entire cavity. It's cheaper than buying a whole new window frame and putting a new frame in, but it's obviously more expensive than some of the the sort of more less permanent options like bubble wrap and these plastic films. So this is called renter's double glazing. So it traps air between the glass and the room. And actually, it can be really useful as increasing privacy for those people who've got people walking past their windows and they don't want people seeing in. It can actually help. So in winter, what you also want to be doing is letting the sunshine in, and you want to block it out in summer. So thinking about the way that the sun works, obviously in winter, the sun is much lower in the sky. So that's the reason that homes with eaves are really effective, because eaves will block the summer sun, but they will let the winter sun in, as you can see in that picture. Putting up a pergola is a great idea if you need protection in the summer, but you want the sun to come in winter. And then sometimes growing, say, a grapevine, like a deciduous vine up a pergola, means that, again, I've seen people have pergolas and they have a beautiful grapevine in summer, but the grapevine loses all of its leaves, and then the winter sun can pour in during the day in winter. So thinking about what's going on outside the house is also really powerful for keeping the home cool or warm. External window blinds are really powerful in summer for keeping the heat off westerly walls and windows. For those of you who might have been around in the 1990s, 1970s, you might have seen the external blinds, the stripy ones that used to sit over the windows on the outside of Australian homes. We tend not to do that as much anymore because we're very concerned about how things look sometimes, but they can be very effective in blocking out the sun. Interestingly, I've just come back from a trip overseas in Europe where they're having a nice heat wave, and it was fascinating to see the way that in Europe they use wooden shutters on their windows, and they close them up during the day and they literally block all of the sun out. But at night time, they also in winter would keep a lot of the heat in, because they provide that extra insulation layer. It's not something that we have in Australia very much, but it's a really powerful way to manage the heat and cool transfer.
Helen,
Questions?
there's a few questions in the chat, which I thought you might want to address. There's one about how do you actually shade or curtain a triangular window, which is a really interesting one. I haven't dealt with that myself. And the next question was what tends to be more effective in terms of curtains, the pelmet or the honeycomb blinds? I think they're both really great questions.
Yeah. Look, the triangular window one, I've got triangular windows, and I asked somebody that question the other day myself. And I think that the blinds can definitely be made for the triangular windows. So you can get blinds made, custom made for particular spaces. So if you talk to the blind companies and see what they can do, there might be some, incredibly interesting triangular windows that are too challenging for them, but I'm pretty sure they could certainly deal with mine. So for example, if you have a pitched roof, which is what I've got in my house, and I've got a window that runs from the pitched roof down to the ground, the top section of my pitched roof is actually triangular. And so, yeah, I've got that same challenge. So I think that's the best way to deal with triangular windows. With regards to the pelmets and the blinds and the honeycomb, look, it's the good thing about curtains is they can be designed to cover over the entire expanse of the window cavity. So you can bring a curtain sort of, 6 inches either side of the cavity. You'll still get air, if your house isn't sealed up, which we're about to talk about, you'll still get air coming in potentially, but that can give you really good coverage. The nice thing about the honeycomb blinds is they can be designed to fit really closely to the edge of the frame, and that gives you really good coverage as well. But the difference is probably marginal, but it would also depend on the thickness of the curtains, the structure of the pelmet, the quality of the honeycomb blinds, the expanse of the window that everybody has in their house. But I would say, taking all of those things into account, it's probably pretty marginal. And I think probably a lot of people just like to think about, well, what's going to suit you best, what goes in the room best. And so it's really good just to know that there are options for what might suit your room best. You'll still get a really good benefit out of anything that creates an extra air layer between the room and the outside area. And that's what happens with double glazing. There's an extra air layer between the glass. And when you put your hand on a double glazed window, you can feel the difference between putting your hand on a single glazed window in winter. So hopefully that answers the question. Sorry if it's not technically precise about which one's better, but there are so many variables in there that it's probably quite hard to say. Was there anything else in there, Jenny?
No, not at this time. So,
Okay.
Yep, that'd be great.
Right.
That's great. Thanks.
Let's keep going with the sealing up. So remember at the beginning I said there's 3 sort of stages. There's the wrap it, then there's the seal it, and then there's the appliance check. So now we're up to the sort of sealing up stage. We've always been trained, to know that insulating your house is a really good energy efficiency measure. But what's become apparent over recent times is that actually sealing up your home and stopping air leakage in and out of the house through some of what are called, some of these very tiny gaps that can exist around your home. And you can see them in this picture. And for those of you that particularly live in older houses, and when I say older, anything that's sort of 1930s through to 2000, you might find that you've got slightly wonky walls, doors that don't close properly, foundations that shift, in the dry seasons and the wet seasons. And when you go looking around your home, you can often identify that there are gaps in floorboards, between floorboards and skirting boards, around the edges of window frames, underneath the doors that are opening to the outside, particularly in gas vents and ducts. So very old houses often have ducting, vents that sit up high up in the wall. I'm thinking probably not so much in Ku-ring-gai, but potentially in Ryde, you might have some of the houses that are old enough to have the built-in plaster ducting. And then, unducted ceiling fans, tastics, around the edges of tastics that have been installed, things like that. So it's a really interesting thing when somebody does what they call a blower test on your house. And what they do is they seal up your house and they start sucking air out of a blower. And by sucking the air out of your house, as you go around your window frames and you put your hand up to the window frames, you can feel the air being sucked into your house. And it shows you where all the gaps are. But you don't need a blower test to do it. You can actually just wander around your own home. You can just put your hand around the edges of your window frames, particularly on a cold night. It works really, really well. And see whether you can feel things coming in. Just use your eyes, have a look around, see what you can see. If you really get keen, you can walk around with a little candle and see if the candle flame gets blown by air that's coming in. It helps you or an incense stick, something that's got a little bit of smoke coming off it, and then you can see whether the air is coming inside. And that's a really good way to identify gaps. There are lots of gaps in most Australian homes. The good news is, actually, I'm just going to talk a little bit more about this and then we'll talk about how to fix up some of those gaps. So the other thing to think about for your home is thermal mass. Thinking about whether your floor's got brick and concrete to soak up heat, whether you've got a concrete slab that you can get sun in winter. So it's really good if you have got a concrete slab in your home to let the sun in during the day and to close up your house at night time to stop that heat disappearing out of your house. But what happens is that concrete slab can actually release heat back into your home, and that can help your home stay warm during the night times. Actually, I just realized it doesn't actually talk about how to deal with the ceiling issue. So one of the things that you can do is just go to Bunnings and buy yourself what's called a caulking gun, and you can go around and seal up some of the gaps that are in between the floorboards and the skirting boards. It does take a little bit of skill. We have some great workshops at Renew with people who show you how to do those kinds of things. But it's something that anybody can do with a little bit of practice. You squeeze out the filler, you put the filler in the hole, use your thumb, you smooth it down, and you get a cloth and you wipe it down. And then before you know it, you've actually let it dry and you've sealed up some of the basic gaps in your home. If you're living in a home that's a bit more modern and the walls are straight and you're on a concrete slab, you might not get so much movement. If it was constructed a bit more solidly, then you're less likely to have those kind of gaps in your home. I went from a home that had a whole load of gaps to a home that's got no gaps just because it was a much more modern house. So that's the benefit of living in a more modern home. All right, so let's talk about heating and what the options are there. So there's a whole range of appliances that we can use for heating. Be interesting to see in the room who's got sort of fixed heating and who's got sort of what we call portable heating. Obviously, there's the heat that you can get from a reverse cycle air conditioning unit, and that's something that we haven't really been talking about in Australia as much as we should have, because that is actually one of the most efficient and effective ways that we can get heating. And the beautiful thing about a reverse cycle air conditioning unit is that we can use it for cooling in summer and heating in winter. Oh, that's great, Jenny. Jenny's just put a link to one of my favourite people, who's Lish Fayer, and the Green It Yourself websites. And Lish is a fantastic handy woman. And she and her friend Jenny Edwards are the Fix It Chicks, and they also have lots of great tips about draft sealing and home improvements. So heating appliances, obviously there's gas heating, which can be a single unit gas heater or ducted gas heating, which a lot of people have coming up through the floor. And then we have what we call resistive electric heaters. So things that you plug in where you've either got radiant heat coming out, or maybe it's like a column oil heater. To look at the options that we have here, it's really important to know that the most energy efficient of those heating options for anybody is the first one, which is the reverse cycle air conditioning unit. So if you have an RCAC, then I'd highly suggest you use it for heating. And if you don't have a reverse cycle air conditioning unit, then focus on your insulation first, because the risk of all the other heating types is that you spend a lot of money on heating and you're losing that heating out of your gaps and through uninsulated walls and windows. So the reason that the reverse cycle air conditioner is so cost effective is because it's very energy efficient. For every unit of energy that goes into a reverse cycle air conditioning unit, it saves you or uses 4 to 6 units of heat for every unit that goes in. For all of the other types of electric heating, it's 1 unit of energy in, 1 unit of heat out. So that's because a reverse cycle air conditioning system uses a technology that takes energy from the surrounding air and value adds. So whatever you thought about using your air conditioning unit, and I know there was a lot of messaging about not using your air conditioning unit because it's really inefficient. These days, they're the most efficient heating that you can use, and you can use them for cooling. Ducted air conditioning is not as effective as reverse cycle air conditioning for summer. Ducted air conditioning uses the same technology as one of these systems that you can see in the picture. It has the outside units and the inside units. The only reason it's not quite as efficient is because it's using 1 unit and then pushing air out through the house. And what we know is that using individual units in each bedroom is actually a more efficient way to operate it. That's a reasonably marginal difference, so I wouldn't get too bogged down in that. A lot of people like ducted air conditioning, which you can also use for heating. They like it because they build it into the walls of a home and it's very streamlined, and they don't like seeing the big units on the walls in every room. But the whole of house, what we call the whole of house reverse cycle systems, can be very expensive to install if you do it all at one time. And also they just don't run quite as efficiently as single units. But they're certainly better than using gas ducted heating. And I'll come back to that in a minute. Okay. So gas ducted heating is about 80% efficient, and a reverse cycle air conditioner using it for heating is about 450% efficient. And that's because of what I was saying before, that when you put 1 unit of energy into a reverse cycle system, you get 4 to 5 units out. The reason that gas ducted heating is not as efficient is because you lose energy between the unit that sits outside the house. You lose energy between there and the ducts. You can lose heat out of the ducts. The ducting under the house needs to be really well maintained to make sure there's no leaks in it and that you're not just heating, the space for the rats and the mice. And you also need to make sure, and you also just lose energy on the way to the rooms. So that's not a particularly efficient option. Of course, the other thing about gas heating is that it's got quite a lot of other considerations. The first one is that it's a fossil fuel, so you can't generate gas heating without creating emissions. Whereas with electric heating, you can actually think about using your solar to help, or solar and batteries to help run your heating. The next thing is that with gas, you're obviously paying a separate connection fee. So if you've got any gas coming into the house at all, you're probably paying about $300 to $450 in connection fees alone, even before you've paid for any fuel. So if you can get a house to become all electric, then you can end up saving a lot of money on your gas bill by just not paying the gas connection. We'll come back to that in a bit too. So here you go. This shows you that idea about the typical split system versus the multi-split. That's a multi-split where you put a head in each room. And then the one that the question was about was ducted, which is the next version of this. In New South Wales, there's some rebates available for some of these units as well. So that's really worth being aware of. So general heating tips. Make sure if you've got ceiling fans that you put your ceiling fans on the winter setting. Most ceiling fans have got a little switch on them, one for summer direction, one for winter. And that will actually really help because it keeps the warm air circulating. So if you're generating heat at the bottom of your room, what happens is the heat in the room rises. So heat rises, it goes up to the ceiling, and then you're left sitting at the bottom of the room on your sofa feeling a bit chilly. But if you've got a ceiling fan, it's really worth turning it on. It pushes the air back down into the room and it can help keep you nice and warm. And the good thing about that is that ceiling fans are really energy efficient to run. So that's a really great way to just get the best bang for buck from whatever heating that you're using. Obviously, you can put on a jumper. That always helps with heating bills. It's interesting. A lot of people don't choose to do that these days. They want their rooms to be very warm so they can move freely about the house. But obviously, if you're my age, you remember your parents saying to you, just put a jumper on and go and put your moccasins on and stay warm. But the other thing to think about is whether or not just heating yourself and not the room. So by using, say, a heated throw, which is a really energy efficient thing to do, you can usually buy those at any sort of, David Jones or Myers or whatever, and you plug them in. If you're sitting on the sofa for long periods of time and it's really cold and you don't have any good heating, you plug those in and you sit underneath them. They're very toasty, but they're very, very low on energy use, so incredibly energy efficient. And think about using radiant heaters in bathrooms. If you don't want to heat your bathroom all the time because you're not in there most of the time, but you do want a heater on when you jump out of the shower, then a radiant heater, while we wouldn't recommend it for general use, is a really good option in a bathroom because you're just using it for a really short, sharp hit of heat. And it can give you that in a really efficient way because as long as you don't leave it on, it'll be fine. So I'm just going to stop, see if anyone got any questions around heating. I can see a comment in the chat saying a heated blanket is the only heating I have at the moment. Feet feel like they're freezing. Yeah, that's great. Yeah,
Helen, sorry, Helen, there is one. Is convection heater more efficient than ceramic heater?
In terms of the efficiency of the units that you're using, there is no unit that is efficient except a reverse cycle unit. All other heating units, except for gas, which also has efficiency losses, but all other electric heaters that you buy are 1 unit of energy in, 1 unit of heat out. The variation in the type of energy, the type of heater that you buy is actually more about the perception, how you perceive the heat that comes from it. And that's a lot to do with how you live and how you like to receive heat. So some people they like to feel warm air on them. Some people like radiant heat. Some people like background heat that you might get from oil heaters, or, water heaters, hydronic heating that might exist in a home. Some people like that kind of background heat. But in terms of efficiency, they're all the same. If you run them, for a long time and you run them on high, they will end up showing up on your bill as a pretty high impact. So what I'd almost suggest for portable heating units for electric is see if you can borrow one, try it out in the space that you're going to be using it, because how big your room is and the area that you're trying to heat and how well insulated your house is can make a really big difference as to how you perceive the benefits of that particular unit. And so it's really a bit of trial and error. But in terms of efficiency, always the split system. It just wins hands down. Any more questions in there, Jenny?
Yes, there's 2 more. Susie's asking, what about heat lamps in bathrooms? I thought you might have covered that, but yeah.
Yeah, I think a heat lamp is a bit like the radiant heat. So the heat lamps are I presume you're talking, Susie, about the things that come in the Tastic. So a lot of people got a Tastic installed in their bathroom. It's got a fan attached to it. They're not very energy efficient units in themselves, but because you're using them in a bathroom, it's a pretty short, sharp consumption. And so you're actually not really, how can I say, you're not going to have a high impact on your bill necessarily. So just as long as you make sure that you're actually turning them off. That's the main thing.
The other one is, what do you recommend for chimney breasts circa 1940 brick? Now, I'm not quite sure what a chimney breast is. If you don't, Helen, maybe we can ask Kathy to actually ask her question. But
so I've just looked up what a chimney breast is. So it is what I think it might have been. So there we go. The best thing to do, Kathy, is if you're using the chimney regularly, just make sure that you take that obviously your chimney's clear for when you are using it. But you're right, chimneys are a great way to lose heat out of a room. They're almost like the most direct way you can lose heat out of a room. There are some great products that you can buy. You can buy big pieces of foam, and then all you do is you squeeze the foam into the chimney, underneath the chimney. So if you can get in there, you can buy those custom made, custom designed for chimneys. There's a company in Melbourne called, I'd have to go and look it up for you, and I might need to put it in the chat later, but there's a company in Melbourne that actually that makes them and sells them. So if you look up energy efficiency chimneys, I'm sure they'll come up. And you can just basically, what you do is you squeeze it down, you put it up the chimney, and then you squeeze it out. Just make sure you take it out before you light the open fire on winter solstice, because you don't want to set fire to it. But that's the best thing to do. And you're right, you really do need to block up your chimney. Are portable gas heaters efficient? Not by a comparison standard of a reverse cycle system, not at all. If that's all that you have, then sometimes you can be locked into gas and to portable gas units. They're not efficient for a number of reasons. Firstly, I'm not quite sure why somebody would put a portable gas heater in, because it means that you're actually recommitting to a gas bill, which is that extra bill that I talked about. And then I would also say that a portable gas unit probably operates a little bit like a portable electric unit. It depends on the room, depends on the size of the space, it depends on your insulation. And obviously if your house isn't insulated and it's leaking, then that's not going to be an efficient way to heat. But in general terms, it wouldn't be considered a particularly efficient tool to use. I think that's everybody, is that right?
Yep, that's it for the moment. Look, I was just going to make an additional point about the portable gas heater for Alwyn, and that is that the room needs to be vented. You need to be able to vent your gas heater, so it has to be, because the gas itself can be toxic, and that automatically creates a draft. So old-fashioned houses, so where gas was there as the main source of, for example, cooking and heating, etc., you'll find in the walls they've got built-in vents. If you electrify your home, you can completely close off those vents when you no longer have gas appliances. So that's the sort of double-edged sword, if you like, of those portable gas heaters. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And actually, gas heaters that are unflued in Australian homes is usually, most jurisdictions are illegal to have those in, say, rental properties, because they can be quite dangerous. As is your gas cooktop, which is releasing lots of toxic fumes into your kitchen. But we'll get to that in a second. Hot water. I'm going to quickly run through this. Thing about hot water. Oh, sorry. I skipped over hot water for some reason. Hang on. Let's go back. Gee, that was quick. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. Hot water. So reducing your hot water usage obviously saves energy. So the less water you use, the less water you're heating, the more energy you save. So think about getting a water-saving shower head. There's a lot around. There are some in the shops that have to meet a minimum standard in Australia, but you can also go better than that. For a really small amount of money, you can put a really, really water efficient shower head on. And if you look at some of the brands, the most energy efficient one is a brand, I think it's called like Methuen. It's an overseas brand. They do have those in the mainstream shops, but you can also get them online, and they have like the best feeling of a shower head without actually using very much water at all. Putting aerators on taps and obviously making sure that you insulate the hot water pipes is really important. So gas instant hot water systems, 90% efficient versus, again, a heat pump hot water system, 450. Why is it like that? Because a heat pump hot water system uses exactly the same technology as your reverse cycle air conditioning unit. So what a heat pump hot water system is doing is it's taking energy from the surrounding environment and putting that into the water. So heat pump hot water systems are relatively new in Australia. A lot of people might not have even seen one. In Australia, we tended to have a lot of what we call electric resistance heating hot water systems, where you get the tank. And then we have instant gas, where you've just got the box on the wall. And then also you can have gas boosted tanks as well. So here's some of the different types. That's the box I was talking about, the Rinnai box on the wall that actually heats up the water as it's used by the gas burner. So they run they're pretty efficient, about 90% efficient, and they're fairly cheap to run if you're on gas, and a lot of people who are on gas would probably already would have one of those. The storage tanks, the electric storage tank heating is much less efficient using resistive hot water. So let's go to the next slide. Sorry. So the old-fashioned resistive hot water storage tanks are much less efficient, and I wouldn't really recommend using one of those, but it is really important to remember that if you are running on solar and you can use your solar power to heat your hot water in a tank, then that could be a really good way to go. But on the left-hand side here, we've got the heat pump hot water systems. There's two different sorts. There's one where the unit is separate to the tank, and one where the operating unit is integrated into the tank. I've got one of the integrated ones just out in the driveway. It's quite slim and it fits on the side of my house really nicely. When you put a heat pump hot water system in, you will barely notice your water heating on your bill. They are very, very efficient. And you can get rebates on these as well, because this is where governments around Australia are trying to get people to go, because they save a lot of money. Now, one of the challenges of any kind of tank hot water system is making sure you've got space to put the tank in. So when you're looking at hot water, it is a little bit about thinking about what your house is, what you've currently got, and then what you can switch out to. But anybody who's got a tank already and you're using electric tank hot water, would highly recommend thinking about putting a heat pump in. Solar thermal is the other option, which is where we use solar panels on the roof that heat water in a tank on the roof. And then the other type of solar thermal is where you just have the sort of the piping that sits on the roof and heats up. Less frequently installed these days, because most people, what they're doing is putting solar panels on their roof to generate electricity, to put the electricity into their battery, and then run their electric appliances off their batteries. So it's a little bit less common to put a solar thermal unit in on a roof now. Can a heat pump hot water be successfully connected to off-peak night-only power? Absolutely. So when you install your heat pump, it comes with a timer, and you can set the heat pump to run either during the day or at night time. I have mine running during the day because I've got solar on the roof, so my hot water is heated purely off my solar panels, and then it switches off as the sun goes down. My heat pump switches off at 4 o'clock, and the tank stores the water in the heat pump, and that gets us through to the next day. But you could do it the other way around as well. So if you're not generating solar, then you can run it on off-peak power. Okay, any more questions about water and hot water? All right, we can always come back to it if you need to. Jenny's put a link in the chat about Sydney Water, who've got efficient shower heads, so that's great to know. All right, other things. For those of us who were born in, the 60s or the 70s, the transition from the old light globe right through to the new technologies has been quite fascinating to watch. And I think we've gone through basically 4 different kind of light globe types. So the first one is the standard one that we had back in the old days, where if you broke it, it broke, the glass broke, it broke into lots of little pieces. And then we moved into the halogen globes, which were very energy consuming, became very popular. And you can get halogens in all different sizes. And a lot of people put a lot of halogen globes in their ceilings because they, peppered their ceiling with halogen globes. I've still got one up in my ceiling that isn't connected, but I'd like to get rid of. Then we moved into the compact fluorescent globes, which is the ones that have got the curly spirals. And then last but not least, we've moved into LEDs. And these days, when you go into Bunnings, most of the selection of globes that you buy are LEDs. It's interesting because the picture of the LED in this image is actually one of the very original LEDs, but now, of course, they come in all sizes and shapes. You can buy them in white and yellow and different colors. You can get tiny ones and big ones. So the take-home message from lighting is that the cost of LED globes has gone down markedly over the last 5 years. They're really worthwhile going to get. They'll save you a lot of money, and that you actually don't need to replace them very often either. So they're very, very resilient. They last for a long time. And once you've got them installed, they can last you sort of, 20 or 30 years. Okay, I'm going to come back to those questions later because they're about other things. Oh, that's okay. I'm just trying to drive this again. There we go. So with general appliances, general rule of thumb is to make sure you check your energy rating on your appliances. Things like fridges that are older can be losing a lot of energy around the seal, around the edge of the fridge. The new fridges are much more efficient. And worth having a look at that. If you need a new fridge, then it's something that's actually going to save you money as well on consumption. Make sure you don't install your fridge next door to your stove, because you need to keep fridges away from heat so that they can operate most efficiently. And then standby power usage can also be quite high. So it's a little bit better these days than what it used to be in terms of some of the appliances that we have. They don't consume quite as much standby power as they used to. But it's not a bad idea when you get your energy assessment done to just get somebody to check that you haven't got appliances that are sort of overnight sucking energy that you're not wanting to use. Of course, these days we are overnight charging things up. We're charging up our phones and our bikes and our scooters and bits and pieces and our computers. But sometimes when you're inadvertently leaving things on, that can actually consume energy that you don't want to be consuming. So just a slide about some resources that are available. In some very exciting news, the New South Wales government have just announced what they're calling the Energy Saver loans, which this only got announced last week, actually. So from the 1st of July this year, they're going to be giving out $15,000 free no fee loans and zero interest for eligible households, which you can repay up to 10 years. So these are available to households earning up to $210,000 a year, and they can fund insulation, draft proofing, heat pumps, reverse cycle air conditioning, solar batteries, and glazing. Now, this can be a really powerful tool because if you do the maths and you actually spend, say, $15,000 doing some upgrades to your home, what you'll end up finding is that you'll probably save more money on your energy bills than what you would spend on repaying the $15,000. And because it's interest free, it makes it quite a good deal. So the other thing is that it also, like, it's connected to the NatHERS assessments, and it can help you just implement some of those NatHERS assessments. I've got a question here about the 3-hour free electricity. How do you get a smart meter, and what are the downsides of smart meters? That's a big question. Usually you get a smart meter when you go onto a particular type of tariff and you can access it through the retailer. Victoria did roll out smart meters much more widely across the community, but I don't think that happened in other parts of the country. If you're installing solar and a battery, then what happens is as you do that, you generally get a more kind of high-tech interface on your phone, which shows you how your energy is being used, and that can be integrated with smart metering. The smart meters aren't sort of a big topic of conversation for everybody at the moment. I think probably, they got rolled out and there were some problems with them, but I think it's about talking to your energy retailer and choosing your tariff. And that's the way that you access the smart meters, I think, at the moment. So I can take that on notice if it's helpful to get a bit more information about it in New South Wales. Any more questions in there, Jenny?
Yes, Helen, I've just responded to Louise about the 3-phase power. So the question around, if you're in an apartment in an older building, can you switch across to instantaneous electric? I've just done a bit of research myself. I live in an apartment, I'm a renter as well, and I have instantaneous gas. So I was hoping I might be able to get across to instantaneous electric. But the electrician said that without 3-phase power already being available, that was one thing. That would be an expense that the strata managers or the strata committee of the block would need to investigate. The other thing was that even from the switchboard where I was located, they would need to bring the electric wiring from the switchboard to my apartment in order to hook in that instantaneous electric. So yeah, I was quite disappointed by that, but yeah, it's not necessarily an easy, straightforward process. So yeah.
That sounds like you've got
the Louise has got 3-phase. Yippee!
Yeah. So 3-phase, Louise, is just about it, like, without going into the actual kind of what's happening behind the scenes. It's basically for people who've got really high consumption. Most residential homes don't need 3-phase power, but I'm imagining the instantaneous electric hot waters puts a really high demand load on your consumption, and therefore you need a bigger system to kind of manage that, a bigger electrical connection to the network to manage that. So what was your actual question? Was it about how to, you may not have, oh, hang on, sorry, I'm just trying to find it. Instant electric hot water. Oh, sorry, it was Orwin's question. Yep. So there are Orwin, but they are reasonably rare. One of the issues in apartments is that not all apartments have space for putting a tank in. A lot of older apartments used to have the tanks in the kitchen sometimes, or in a cupboard in the hallway, and sometimes even the tanks were square to fit in the cupboards. I remember a really early one that I had from the 1960s. If you've got a bit of space, then you can put a tank in, but a lot of apartments, you don't want the tank sitting on your balcony. And so instantaneous electric is going to be something that we're probably going to see a little bit more of, because it might be one of the only solutions to electrifying your apartments without actually taking up all of that space. Apartments can be really complicated because there are shared resources, shared sort of shared systems, energy and water systems, and often apartment blocks require sort of shared investment in making upgrades and making collective decisions about what's going to change. So particularly if you're in what we used to call a type A multi-unit, which is where you've got flats sitting on top of each other, as opposed to say townhouses, which are much easier to make changes to because you're freestanding. But blocks of flats and apartments can be really, really tricky. Some of them have got gas boilers in the basements that they share heating resources with. Some of them have got shared water resources. And probably Louise's three-phase power is because the instantaneous gas is being used across the block.
There's another question in there, Helen. This one's going back to windows. What are the options for improving the thermal envelope when you have a lot of externally facing glass sliding doors? Ku-ring-gai is renowned for houses with a lot of glazing, so I think that's a fairly common question. They could be from Ryde, but our building stock is commonly
the indoor-outdoor living. Yeah. Lauren, I don't know if you can quickly pop in the chat. Are you north-facing or south-facing with those? Do you know that orientation? I think, because I think one of the most effective ways to protect large areas of glass is to step back from the house and think about so it's probably both, okay? You've got a lot of glass. Is really to think about what's going on outside the house. And I know this is not a great answer because some of it can be quite long term, but thinking about plantings and deciduous trees and vines, what I call external protection. Everything from hanging up a tarpaulin outside a window. I've seen people literally peg tarps to their guttering to protect west-facing walls and heavy windows. Now, you probably don't want to do that on your house long term because if it's a door, it's probably an access space and you're probably going in and out. But certainly thinking about the garden and what options you might have there first, and thinking about the physical things that you can do outside to protect it. Anything that you can put up like a shade cloth in summer to protect that glass externally. So putting the shade cloth poles in and hanging a shade cloth is really powerful. Funny story. I was at a friend's house I've just come back from overseas, as I said, and I was at a friend's house and she had made a beautiful patchwork fabric tarp, and she hung it up every summer on the outside wall of her house with a couple of pegs on the house and a pole out the front. And it was incredibly effective at protecting both the wall of the house, which you could do with the glass, and also just giving a shaded area outside. Pull out blinds, yeah. So I think the external stuff is powerful, that I would look at external blinds, but the problem with a window that you're using as a door is you can't pull a blind down because then you can't use the door. So things like shade cloth can be really effective. That's Louise, yeah. Pull down blinds does wonders. Yeah. They do. And the other thing that you can get on windows is those metal blinds. But again, it's going to be hard if you're using it as a door. But there's some really good, think about your external options. That's what I'd primarily suggest. Unless you can afford, of course, to replace your entire door unit with double glazing, and that can be incredibly expensive. There's another question here about what about those things you put in your roof to take the heat out in summer? The whirlybirds. Really great, Louise. Thank you for answering that question. I was going to say the whirlybirds aren't particularly effective. They have been shown not to do very much, so probably not worth wasting your money on them. I put one in my house in Canberra. I didn't really notice it. It whirlybirded away, but I don't think it made much difference either. So nice idea, but not very effective. And Susie said she made a pull-out blind and it was 12 degrees more where we didn't have them. Yeah. So I would really think about shade cloth, greenery, external shading is probably the easiest thing to do if you want to keep going in and out. Obviously, you could build a pergola as well, and you could maybe even build a pergola that you cover in summer a little bit, but you open it up in winter, so a bit of flexibility around that. All of those things will be cheaper than replacing all of those windows with double glazing. There's a question from Owen about received notice of a new charge CL1 service. You're going to have to let me take that one on notice. Owen, I do not know what that is. Is that, I presume that's on your bill, on your electricity bill? Oh, actually, I have an idea about what that might be, but I'm still going to take it on notice so I don't say the wrong thing. And perhaps I can get back to you. Okay, we've got 15 minutes left. I think there's still a few things to go through, but it's really been great doing the questions as we go because it's allowed us to sort of reflect on what's happening at the time. There's lots of good resources here that you can just grab with the QR codes that are relevant to making your house more energy efficient. The one on the left on the bottom is our Getting Off Gas Toolkit, which has got really good info about how to get off gas and how to electrify your home. And you can also see there some of the New South Wales government incentive schemes. Don't worry, you'll be able to get back to this. Okay, and that's it from me. Happy to take any more questions. And the only thing I just thought we might touch on quickly before I finish is just a little bit about electrification, which wasn't in here because this was really about thermal efficiency and winter. But if you do decide to try to get your house off gas and to get rid of that gas bill, the key benefits really are that your heating and cooling becomes very energy efficient. You need to change over your hot water system as well, and use a heat pump for that or go electric resistance. But a heat pump is a great option if you've got space. And you can get rebates for heat pumped hot water systems. And of course, the third thing that you need to do in that conversation is potentially change your electric cooktop to an change your gas cooktop to an electric cooktop. And I know that people love their gas cooktops and they're really used to them. I would say the only thing you'd probably want to change to is an induction cooktop. If you like gas, then the step up from gas is induction and the step down is ceramic electric cooktops. And the reason for that is that you don't have the control with a ceramic electric cooktop, but with induction, you've got a lot of control. You can really get really high temperatures. You can get really low temperatures. You can control it in between. They're easy to keep clean. They're very easy to use, but also they're just a sort of much more sophisticated technology. Now they don't suit everybody, but if you haven't had a chance to play on an induction cooktop, then I would say find somebody who's got one and go around and see how they work because they can be really effective. Okay, any other questions? Jenny or Liz, do you have any other questions?
Not that I can see. I was just typing to respond to Alan. That CL1, I've just done a quick search. It's a controlled load, and it appears that it may have they may be changing the period that the controlled load applies to. So controlled load is where your electricity supplier actually limits the time that you might get a cheaper period of access to electricity. So it could be from, say, 10 o'clock at night to 7 o'clock in the morning is the example that they provided. This was from Endeavour Energy, which doesn't operate within this area. It's going to be Ausgrid, but let's presume that Ausgrid's doing the same. And so they're saying that they're allowing for some use of the controlled load during the day. So it might be related to the solar sharer program that's coming in. But yeah, not clear. Probably better to go back to your energy retailer and ask them the question and get clear on that. Yeah.
Right. Thanks, Jenny.
That's all right.
Good. All right. Well, then, before I wrap up, just a little bit about Renew and why I'm here tonight. So, Renew is a community-based organisation. We are a national organisation. We operate all around Australia. We have a really active branch of people operating from Sydney and the surrounding regions, Newcastle and Wollongong. And we're an organisation that basically, we started out as being called the Alternative Technology Association, and we used to go around showing people how to use solar panels. We're a long way from that. And that was back in the 80s, kind of showing people that solar worked. We're a long way from that now. And what we do is we work with community and community groups, providing sustainability, education, advice. We do research into sustainability. We do advocacy on behalf of the community around sustainability initiatives and funding. And we also host an event called Sustainable House Day, which is a national event where people open up their own homes that are sustainable and they show other people through. So Sustainable House Day was just held on May the 17th this year, and we had a whole host of houses in New South Wales where people have tickets, they buy a ticket and they go around to visit people's houses, and people can show them all of the things that I've been talking about tonight. Including, everything from the beautiful high-end houses, passive houses that are, fully sealed up and highly designed, through to energy retrofits, which is what we've really been talking about tonight. So if you'd like to find out more about Renew or Sustainable House Day, you can go to our websites, renew.org.au and sustainablehouseday.com. And also we're on social media, so you can follow us on Instagram and on Facebook if you'd like to just stay in touch with what we're doing. We run events for the community, and as part of Sustainable House Day this year, we're just wrapping up our webinar series, which is on the Sustainable House Day website. And if you're interested in, I think we've got 3 more presentations to go, but if you're interested, all of them are being recorded. And so you can get hold of any of the recordings of the ones that have happened or come along to the ones that are still going to happen. On Thursday night this week, we particularly have a couple of experts in the electrification space. Tim Forsey, who has written a wonderful book about electrifying your homes, and Brendan Lang, who's an electrician based in Melbourne, and I'll be there as well. And so we'll be going in deep dive, talking about how to electrify your house if you'd like to get it off gas and save money and create less greenhouse emissions. So yeah, if you'd like to come along to that one, just jump onto the Sustainable House Day website and you can find out more about it there. Great. Thanks, Jenny. Thank you so much for having me tonight. And I think Jenny and Liz have got a little bit more information for you from the councils.
Thank you, Helen. That was fantastic. Would you mind just staying on? And I think there's maybe one other question came in. Do you mind just having a look at that?
Yeah.
And Liz and I are just going to finish up with some information about the sort of programs that our respective councils offer. I've mentioned in the chat rebates. Liz has mentioned about the use of their thermal camera, etc. So we've got some information to share on that. Won't take very long. And at the very end, we've got a QR code to an evaluation survey. Now, it's set up through City of Ryde, but if you're a Ku-ring-gai resident, please do use that form as well, and you can just put in the drop down where it asks for suburb, just put in your suburb, and then we know that you're from Ku-ring-gai. And I think, Liz, we might be able to share that link, that evaluation link, afterwards as well via email. That might work out well too.
Yes, absolutely. We'll send that out.
Great. Okay, so Caitlin, can you fire up our last few slides for us? Not sure. Oh, here we go. Sorry, must be just taking a moment in the changeover from the sharing. Here we go. Great, thank you. If you could just put that, lovely, full screen. Yep, there we go. Next one. Great. So just a few dot points there in terms of Ku-ring-gai Council's sustainability programs. We do have a rebate program that's going to recommence from the 1st of July this year. I invite you to have a look on our website, or you can contact me at council and I can talk you through that. We also have a free home advisory service called Green Style that you're able to book into online. We offer we haven't really talked about the sort of waste components of things. It's mostly been focused obviously on energy tonight, but we do offer a up to 60% discount for people through Compost Revolution. And we have a volunteer program called Net Zero Champions that a lot of Ku-ring-gai residents are involved in. There's lots of resources on our dedicated webpage on netzero.krg.nsw.gov.au. Yep, I think that's pretty much from me. So maybe over to Liz, you can talk through your City of Ryde programs.
Thanks, Jenny. We at City of Ryde, we run the Home Waste and Sustainability Advisory Service. So you've got the option to have a free home assessment. We'll provide you with an action plan, and you can have a council officer come out and discuss with you specifics around your home. We'll bring a thermal camera, we'll look at your energy, water and waste and come up with ways to improve the comfort of your home, the energy efficiency, and also reduce your bills, which is a great bonus. That's free to join up. There's a QR code there if you're interested, and we do have an annual draw where you can win one of 3 prizes of $1,500 towards sustainable home improvements. Someone's just put it towards solar panels, so that's a really good added bonus. In addition to that, as I mentioned in the chat, we have Save Power kits where you can loan a thermal gun, or as part of the assessment, we can bring out a thermal camera if that's of interest to you to look at how thermally efficient your home is. We also run a program of workshops throughout World Environment Day, of which this is part of throughout June. So we have a sustainable living newsletter called Smarter, Cleaner, Greener. If you're interested in what's going on in this area, do go along to the council website. There is the option to join up to this program and also our sustainability newsletter to keep you updated. And I think the lights have just gone out on me.
That's pretty apt, Liz, I'd say, at this point of the night. I'm just typing in a response to Louise with my email address. I don't know if she's Ryde or Ku-ring-gai, but she'll have mine. So I'll just do that quickly. I think we can probably go through to the very last slide then, which is the evaluation. We'll leave that up until for the last 5 minutes so that people have an opportunity to go onto that and fill out the survey. I've just popped into the chat my email address here at Ku-ring-gai Council. Maybe Liz, you could do the same so that if there's any of your residents keen to contact you directly. Yeah, so some of those remaining questions. Also like to...
Yeah. There's one from Louise about strata title and people who want to get solar on the roofs of their apartment blocks. Does the strata have the right of refusal? So I would, in New South Wales, you do need to get, if you're on an apartment block that has got a shared roof space, that you need to remember that the roof space is a shared asset. So the roof space is owned by the owners corporation. And so you do need to get a collective agreement to use a shared roof space like that. You do need in New South Wales to get 50% approval, I think, to put solar on. So I think the strata title will have the owners corporation will have rules around what's the percentage of vote that you need to get something through, and I think it's 50% in New South Wales. The thing that I would say is just remember that the strata is actually the owners, so it is people like you. Obviously, it's much harder in bigger blocks sometimes to get organised. But we would really encourage people who are in strata titles to actually, get a group of people together to work on a project like putting solar on as a group project, do the numbers, put the benefits in front of the other owners and see if you can get support for something like that to go through, because it can be really beneficial. And most people are pretty open to it these days, I think. Obviously, if you're in a strata with a townhouse, then I think your roof space is your own, and I don't think there are any rules about what you can do unless there's rules about how it looks or heritage. I don't think so. but that might depend on the council or the area that you're in. Is that right? Council people?
Oh, sorry, I'm just vagued out because someone had
That's
trouble with the QR code. Sorry, what was that, Helen?
No, that's no good. So that's the thing about strata. It can be a bit complicated. I've put a link into the chat that's got
Yeah.
New South Wales Energy website that gives really some good information about putting solar on apartments. And New South Wales government's got some programs that are currently open, and they're open until December this year. So it's really worth, if you're interested, having a look at that. And I think that they might help facilitate some of those processes and provide information as well.
Yeah, look, Helen, I suggested that Louise contact me directly, or Liz. I've got the background information. I've got some standard information I can provide. We also have, I should have mentioned that we have a smart units rebate program, but that's all available through our website. It appears that there is a problem with the QR code. And I'm just wondering if that's the case and we want to finish up on time. Liz, we can just send that out via email to the attendees. I'm pretty sure we can do that because we've got everyone's email details.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I've had a look and it's no problem to me. So maybe it just depends on people's phones, but I can send a link as an alternative to the QR code if everybody's happy to.
Great.
Do that later.
And also, Helen, someone's interested in your in the webinars. If you can pop the link into the chat now, or we can just, if we need to, we could do it as a follow-up.
That's easy done. There we go. Oops, hang on. Just go to sustainablehouseday.com. And there's one final question around flat tariffs versus time of use tariffs. The answer to that question is it entirely depends on how and when you use electricity and what you're using it for. So I would get personalised advice on that. It's different depending on whether you are at home during the day, whether your energy consumption's at night, whether you have a solar on the roof, whether you're using solar to charge an electric vehicle, and or whether you have a battery. So it really does depend, but mostly thinking about whatever kind of tariff you choose, and then what you do is you engineer your tariff around your consumption patterns and when you need power and when you get the best value on power for what you need. So, for example, if you have an electric vehicle and you want to charge it overnight because you drive it every day, then you'd be looking for an EV night tariff between say 12 p.m. and 6 a.m. Really cheap electricity coming in between 12 and 6, you can charge your EV on it. But if you've got a battery and you want to charge your EV a little bit off that, or you're like me and you work from home and you're charging your EV directly off the solar, then that overnight tariff isn't going to be something that you would be very interested in, or you might not be eligible for it. So it really is horses for courses in terms of tariff and consumption.
That's great. Thanks a lot, Helen. Liz has now popped the direct link in for that survey. So that's great. Thank you very much. I'd also like to thank Caitlin, who's been behind the scenes managing the slideshows for us. So thanks very much, Caitlin, for your work. And yeah, I think we can pretty much wrap it up there. Thanks, everyone. Yeah. If you've got any further questions, you've got our information. You can contact us directly. Okay. Good night then.